right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about Talky Tina, The Love Boat, Supernatural Women of the 70s, and the show that jumped the shark.
So, Jeff, a pop culture milestone. I mean, a mild milestone. Well, I should get the 40th anniversary of something. Would you care to guess? You want to throw it out there? The 40th anniversary of...
The 40th anniversary of... Oh, my God. I mean, dude, I get hit with these Gen X memes and notifications all the time as I'm doom scrolling on Instagram and Facebook, where it's always like, can you believe that the amount of time that the Black to the Future, Marty McFly would already be blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like all these comparisons. Let me think. Oh my God, 40 years ago today. So what would that be? That would have been back in the late 70s or something, right?
That would be in the early 80s. It would be in the early 80s because we're in 2024. So, right.
The beginning of the end of my cognitive decline.
Right.
Dude, I don't know. Is it, you tell me, I give up.
Well, it's something that we touched on. I think we've talked about this particular TV show at least once, maybe twice, maybe even more references to it. 40 years ago was the final episode of Happy Days. Okay. The last first run episode of Happy Days. Now, and I think we already established, it's like Happy Days was a big show for us. For those of us who remember that, who watched it when it first came on Tuesday nights.
Wait, 40 years ago was the last episode?
The last episode.
Shit. So that means that Happy Days, how long did it go for? I'm trying to think.
It started in 1974. So about 10 years before that, 11 seasons. So again, it went from, 1974 when, things that were going on historically like Watergate and the beginning of the end of the Vietnam War and things like that. And it ended around the time of, Apple computers. I think we've touched on a lot of things that have occurred in that time period. But anyway, so 40 years ago, again, a TV show set in the 50s that aired in the 70s and 80s. And again, that at the time, hey, everybody loved Happy Days. It was on Tuesday nights. I remember, and there's probably people out there, sometimes I had to miss Happy Days because I had to go to CCD, which was essentially Catholic Sunday School. Catholic Sunday School, I don't even know what I went to CCD. Maybe somebody out there could tell. I never really knew what the acronym was. I didn't really care, but my parents made me go. Again, it was the equivalent of modern day Sunday school, except we went on like a Tuesday. And a lot of times, I had to miss baseball games. I had to do whatever. So I had to catch up on Happy Days during the summer.
By the way, that brings up 2 points. Point number 1 is growing up, for whatever reason, all my friends must have just been divided into 2 categories, Catholic or Jewish. That was the only 2 categories, right? Because I constantly couldn't go hang out with my friends. I couldn't go see a movie. We couldn't ride bikes. I couldn't spend the night because somebody had to go to mother effing CCD. Nobody ever explained to me what it stood for, what it is. I'm so glad that even to this day, you have no freaking clue what CCD even stands for. You guys had to go. I guess, thank God I'm Episcopalian, man. The pot smokers religion, apparently, where just anything goes and it's all good. Yeah, and like I said, then the other half of my friends were Jewish. And of course, they were at what? They were at Hebrew school, which I get it. It's your religion. But, selfish me, I didn't want to be away from my friends. So it actually got to a point where I was inviting myself to Hebrew school just to hang out with my friends. It even got to a point where some of their teachers and even their moms were like, Jeff, we love you, but, either you're going to convert to Judaism or maybe just wait until they come home and then maybe you can see them then, Anyway, all right, back to Happy Days, Chris. Sorry about that.
Like I said, it's a show about the 50s that we're watching in the 70s and 80s, and it was a huge hit for years and years. But like a lot of shows that went on long or went on too long, it really kind of went down in quality because it was like, these actors are getting older and it's supposed to be, and now I don't even know, it started in the 50s, but now it's in the 60s. But like they started out with like era appropriate haircuts. And at one point somebody kind of went, Yeah, who gives a shit? We can have longish hair or whatever, sideburns, even though it's supposed to be 1962, or even again, 1962, 63, 64. And Fonzie, one of the lead characters, is still dressing like James Dean, who in that period had already been dead for like 10 years. So maybe people weren't doing the James Dean look.
And Happy Days, you're so right, because it started when you and I were in like second or third grade. In fact, I mean, honestly, we have mentioned Happy Days a few times, like you just said, but in our last episode, the one about magic, we dove pretty heavily into Happy Days, yeah. And then it went all the way until you and I were basically graduating high school. That's a long time in someone's life to have Happy Days. But you're right, it was unrecognizable, right? It starts out as again this takeoff on the great movie American Graffiti, and it's supposed to be
Right.
angsty, fun-loving teenagers, malt shops, roller skates, Chevy Bel Airs, motorcycles, getting into crazy fun, you know, like a G-rated version of Animal House. And then it ends up with almost this depressed, you know, Richie's in the war and he's in the army now, and Fonzie, for F's sake, is now a teacher. And so he's traded in his leather jacket for a tweed jacket with the little elbow patches. And I mean, that is the show, Chris. Let's not forget that actually coined the phrase for the rest of the entertainment industry of jumping the shark, right? For those of you at home that don't know, jumping the shark, right? That is
Right.
the phrase that you use when a TV show finally sucks, right? It gets to that season where it really sucks, and you may as well just call it quits. They
Right.
literally in Happy Days had an episode where Fonzie got on skis in
Water skis.
California, and he's wearing what is he wearing, like baggies or whatever you call them, like
Right.
a bathing
Jams.
suit with dark socks and his boots, right? And his leather jacket, and he's being pulled behind a boat, and he's going to jump literally over a shark. And that was the big episode, which of course coined the frame jumping the shark. And man, I've rarely seen a show jump the shark that hard as that show. It just became this depressed, everyone's on life support, you know, just why are we still watching this? But then again, we came from a generation that had high concept shows, right? So we were kind of like dumbed down to it. We were desensitized, right? We had the guy whose wife was a witch, the guy whose live-in girlfriend was a genie, the guy whose uncle came from Mars, right? The guys who are in a German prison camp, but they're actually able to escape anytime they want, and they're the ones in charge, right? And for those of you, you know, kind of playing at home there, of course, the shows I just referred to are Bewitched with Elizabeth Montgomery. You've also got I Dream of Jeanie, right? That is with Barbara Eden. Then you got My Favorite Martian with Ray Walston and Bill Bixby, right? Bill Bixby later on, of Courtship of Eddie's Father. Ray Walston, of course, famously Mr. Hand, the teacher that gives Jeff Spicoli a hard time in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And then, of course, we have my favorite show probably growing up of all time, which was Hogan's Heroes, which, believe it or not, a lighthearted look at prison camps during World War II. Somehow they pulled it off. Don't ask me how, but that show was absolutely amazing in so many ways. But Chris, we also had the shows that depicted kind of a broken or possibly troubled or possibly rocky kind of a family environment, right?
Right. We had blended families. Right. We had blended families like the Brady's. And we had musical families. Right, like the Partridge family that could be driving around. No, don't worry about school. We're just going to go and do gigs and wear our velvet suits, and everything is going to be okay. Right, and our multicolored school bus. But you're right, very high concepts, and I think maybe that was part of it too. Because I don't know with for you in the sense, and maybe if you're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, going to Hollywood would have been like the ultimate thing, right? Like, oh my God, we're taking a vacation. And I guess, and it's hard again, both of us growing up in California, yeah, going to California would be great, because for me, it was the opposite because my family never really went anywhere. Okay. Um, we went to ball games. We didn't go to vacations. We had all kinds of like season ticket. We had football season tickets, baseball season tickets, and everything else. That's what my dad wanted to do. My dad didn't really want to travel. So when I was watching the Brady Bunch, and the Brady's went to Hawaii, I went to Hawaii. Right when the Brady's went to the Grand Canyon, I went to the Grand Canyon, or a movie studio, or wherever the hell they went. I went with the Bradys because I sure as hell didn't go with my own family.
Chris, with all due respect, man, you're making me sad. Okay. Keep in mind that most people listening to the show, they're just looking for a little bit of enjoyment, right? They just want to reminisce and smile while they're sitting on the toilet, or maybe right after they posted a picture of some food that they just ate or they're about to eat, and now they're just waiting for someone on Facebook to like it or comment. That's all, Chris. They don't ask for much. Okay, so let's pep it up a bit there, huh, pal? Okay, back to what you were saying.
And again, when you think about the times when and if you want to think about the Love Boat, which was, in retrospect, everybody on that show who worked on that ship, right? Every week, somebody was getting some sort of action, if not more than one of them.
Yeah, he's talking about sex, you guys. Everyone on the show Love Boat was hooking up with everyone else, and that included the captain, the ship's doctor, the purser, the bartender, the greeter, or whatever Julie was. I never understood what she did. Everyone on that show, it was implied, was hooking up with everyone at all times. Okay, back to you.
Right, and I'm thinking now, it's like, is that really was that just kind of exaggerated? Was that completely made up? Is that okay? For somebody's like, hey, was there any kind of memos basically saying, do not chase the guests down, do not get drunk with the guests and then end up in their cabin? Or was that, what I mean? Or is that why people worked on cruise ships? Because that's what I thought. Again, I'd never been on a cruise ship, and I'm thinking, wow, cruise ships are kind of wild, right? And there's always stuff going on. And, and then eventually I did go on a cruise once as an adult, and I got to say it was god awful. And, nothing like, well, I mean, I was married, so I wasn't going to be chasing, running around with Dr. Bricker or anything looking for chicks. But you know what I mean? It was just like, this is really kind of
Chris,
gross.
First of all, I can actually see a rain cloud forming over your head as you say that. And secondly, if you think that Charo, Adrienne Barbeau, Heather Thomas, Morgan Fairchild, and all three Charlie's Angels hooking up with guys in bikinis on a boat out to sea is gross, then we have something to talk about, okay? I'm just drawing a line right there. Anyway, on a happier note, back to the Love Boat. What other big TV show, high concept of the 70s, was Bernie Kopell a regular on as the bad guy?
Was he a regular on Get Smart? I mean, kind of an irregular, but okay.
No, well, he was on quite a bit. Yes. Yeah, that's right. He was,
some sort of culturally inappropriate, right, caricature of a German guy, right, with like a heavy accent and spoke funny.
Siegfried. Yes. And he had the German, the quintessential German accent. And for those that don't know, Get Smart was a very clever comedy, and it was based on, it's basically a send up, a parody of spy movies, right? James Bond. And so this was Maxwell Smart, Agent 86. And he famously had a phone in his shoe. And my favorite was the cone of silence. Whenever he wanted to have a private conversation with the chief, they had this giant plastic dome would drop down over them, and it never fucking worked. It was always malfunctioning. The chief was always like, Max, please, no, God, not the cone of silence. The cone of silence. And he demanded anyway, great show, Bernie Kopell. And then, again, just recycled actors again and again and again. But the high concept shows back then, though, hey, man, in their heyday, they were fun, right? Because they were new to us.
But a show like that was created by, I think, Mel Brooks and Buck Henry.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, so of
Huge
course,
genius,
when you look at that, I go, yeah, it makes sense that show was like ahead of, was just smart and funny and, different than your average sitcom. And I think maybe that was the thing. Not only did we have fewer choices, we also, the technology was a sense is, how many times do you think you watch something just because you didn't want to get up off the couch and change the channel, right? It's like, I'm going to remote controls are one of the things that changed, our lives. Watch this. I could change channels. I may only have 4 or 6 of them, or maybe when I had cable, I had more. But the fact that I can remember arguing like, you get up and change it. No, you get up. I'm not going to get up. So then you're watching probably a really bad episode of Happy Days because nobody wanted to get off their ass and change the channel.
You would totally put up with just garbage. I would start off by watching HR Puffin stuff, and the next thing I know, I'm watching Barnaby fucking Jones, and I'm still not off the couch. Why am I watching Barnaby Jones, for fuck's sake? Because the other choice is go outside and stare at the sun.
So you had to kill, if you weren't old enough to quite get to the beach on the bus or ride your bike great distances, you had a lot of time to kill. And yeah, you did want to go outside, but sometimes it was too damn hot, or sometimes you couldn't decide on what you wanted to do. But that's when you stumbled across some gems, right? Like I can remember very explicitly being out and being summertime, and by the time we got up and the house was, nobody cared about unsupervised kids, and we were the original latchkey kids and stuff like that, which I wore as a badge of honor. I thought that was really cool. To this day, my mother, senior citizen mother, still feels guilty about that.
Chris, that is your third and final warning on stuff that makes me sad. But hey, in lighter news, we were talking, Chris, in the last episode about a show that, came on kind of midday, right? That you and I loved very, very much. I know that it was an iconic classic for many. I'm pretty sure it was midday.
Between 12 and 1 o'clock on Channel 5 were episodes of The Twilight Zone, right? And it was just like whatever we were doing at somebody's house or out in the street or playing wiffle ball or whatever, Twilight Zone's on, right? And we would run in, and this is amazing, right? Because it was already past our time, right? Twilight Zone was already, I think Rod Serling was already dead, right? But this is a really cool show. And you kind of I can remember that as being, this is great. This is different.
Rod Serling, you're right. The creator of the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling. And again, for those of you that may not know this, the Twilight Zone was a show that was really conceived, in the early 60s and really had its heyday in the 60s. By the time the 70s came around, it was in syndication, right? So it was in repeats. And it was still in black and white, right? Because there was a time, when all TVs finally switched from black and white to dun 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 color. So all the Twilight Zones were in black and white, and it really gave them kind of a super extra mysterious, weightiness to it that just made it so extra cool. I don't think weightiness is a word, Chris, but it just gave it that feeling, right? And you're right. How is it possible that kids would even care about the Twilight Zone? We're talking about actors nobody recognized, at least I didn't. But the stories were so clever and so well written that now it's really become the blueprint, right, for all these shows that came after it. And of course, the most recent incarnation would be Black Mirror, which, if you haven't seen it, is an amazing series, which is a complete, beautiful send up of the Twilight Zone, but for modern times. But man, Chris, can you go down the Rolodex of just some of the cool episodes that you remember from watching it in the afternoon when your parents were doing something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of them in the sense, and I think to take a step back, and yes, anthology. So these were all standalone stories, right? And they didn't necessarily have happy endings. A lot of them were in that sense, but it was you didn't care because it was so. And then there were writers like Richard Matheson and Harlan Ellison, among others, that Rod Serling, they wrote these shows, and he was the host and the director and the producer, and he was a genius.
Whoa, Chris. I could pole myself into the deepest, nicest poles in the depths of the poliest pole, whatever that means. And I would never, ever be able to pull out even one writer of a Twilight Zone episode. It takes a completely special and unique fan to actually know the names of the writers. Holy shit, dude. I don't even know how many points to award you. Richard so-and-so and Harlan, what's his name? My God, that is absolutely spectacular. Continue, sir.
The stories, again, when you think about it, and we just thought they were cool. We didn't really notice, the allegories about racism, or the, talking about nuclear war and the things like that were all kind of blended in because they were so subtle and they were threaded into the point where you were drawn in. But I mean, yeah, you think of the episode. Yes, I think we touched on again with the ventriloquism dummy. I think there was a couple of them. There was Talking Tina, who wasn't a dummy, but she was one of those talking dolls that I think we all knew about, right? And if you didn't have any sisters, but my sister had some freaking doll called Thumbelina that my brother and I used to just torture, just whatever we could do to that doll, we did.
Chris, if there's any lesson to be learned from the Twilight Zone, it's don't fuck around with dolls. Did you not learn anything?
Absolutely.
You yourself have a broken-jawed Willie Talk ventriloquist doll.
Right.
So you got to be careful, man. And by the way, let me just say something about Talky Tina, because nowadays you might say, oh, big deal, right? It's an episode about a girl's doll, and the doll starts talking beyond what you can have her say when you pull the string in her back. Now she's saying things like, I'm going to kill you, right? And of course, the dad, who's sort of the abusive stepfather, I think was his role, the doll does not like him, right? And she's gunning for him. And of course, what happens? She ultimately ends up killing him, right? No matter how many times he tries to destroy her, no matter how many times he throws her away, she keeps coming back. And again, at home, you might hear this and think, well, that's a pretty stupid premise. I've seen that a million times. No, he didn't. That was like the first time we had ever seen anything like that. And I will also say the acting in the Twilight Zone was top effing notch acting. There was never a bad performance by any actor. And the camera angles and the cinematography for that type of a show, mind-blowing, man. The music and the angles, it was almost like Hitchcock. Man, was that a great show. I encourage anyone that hasn't watched a Twilight Zone episode in a long time, check it out. And
it's been rebooted, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times, and forget it. You know what I mean? But you said Black Mirror is a really modern equivalent, but it's not, they don't call it Twilight. You know, it's definitely inspired by. But yeah, you talk about, the actors you had, you know, I think Robert Redford was in an episode, and Edward G. Robinson.
Oh, man, you are absolutely correct. Of course, Robert Redford played Death, who visits an old woman, and she thinks he's this terrible person trying to get into her cabin, but it turns out he's just the angel of death taking her to a peaceful afterlife, right? That was an awesome episode. And of course, you know, so many television actors ended up in Twilight Zone episodes, of course, right? So that would be William Shatner, who, of course, played Captain Kirk in Star Trek, but was in multiple episodes, right? Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, where he's suffering from a psychiatric breakdown, and he's kind of on the mend and recovering, and he's in an airplane with his wife. And what does he see on a stormy night in the airplane on the wing of the plane? A gremlin, the world's shittiest gremlin costume, but actually also the world's scariest looking gremlin as a result. Don't ask me how they did that. And then later on, he was in a different episode, right? Where he and his bride-to-be or brand new wife, they got addicted to a fortune-telling machine in a little malt shop that could predict their future, which is a great episode. And then speaking of Bewitched, right, we had Elizabeth Montgomery. She played opposite Charles Bronson in an amazing episode, right, where it was like a post-atomic war situation, and they were the only 2 people left on Earth, presumably, kind of an Adam and Eve story. And that one was really cool because there was no dialogue, not one bit of dialogue in the whole entire episode. Just super incredible. Dick York, her husband on Bewitched, was also in an episode, right? That's the one where he flips a coin on his way to work at the bank, and the coin lands on its edge. And for the rest of the day, he can read minds. So cool. Bill Bixby. How about Bill Bixby, right? From The Incredible Hulk. And of course, again, for the 1000th time, Courtship of Eddie's Father. He was in it. Ross Martin from Wild Wild West, which we got to talk about in the next episode. Sebastian Cabot from Family Affair. Mr. French, right? The butler. He played the devil in an episode, which was another just awesome twist at the end. Bob Crane actually was in a Twilight Zone. I know that he did a voiceover in one of them. And then his pal, Ivan Dixon, who played, I think, Kinch, right, in Hogan's Heroes. Then we've got, of course, from our one-eyed celebrity list, we got Peter Falk. He was in one. Happy Days had Ron Howard in one. Lost in Space had the young Will Robinson, Billy Mummy, as a kid who can basically bend reality and create whatever he wants. And he's just this little demon child. So, oh my God, the list goes on. No wonder
we were captivated, Chris.
We were watching reruns at 12 o'clock in syndication on a Thursday in July, because there was nothing like it on regular TV at the time. No, we had to watch a bunch of 35-year-olds sitting around the malt shop and Happy Days because that was what was handed to us, right? So between that, but again, it was something we discovered. I also discovered, there was also those things that we discovered that because they weren't from around here, right? Whether it was like Monty Python, right? And that showed up, right? Or Benny Hill. It's like, again, late at night, same thing, no matter what we were doing. My friends and I were going to watch Benny Hill because that came from Britain. The humor was somewhat over our heads. It was also kind of, let's just say, a little bit bawdy or naughty for U.S. standards. And we thought that was the coolest thing because we might see a girl in her underwear, So, I mean, I think that in a sense with those things that we kind of, gravitated to. And it was like, we had never seen that before.
If you were an adolescent kid, I would a boy, I would say typically, right? You're in your teens or a little bit before that. Benny Hill, a British show, as Chris said, that was syndicated and you could occasionally see it later at night in the United States. And it's just a guy that runs around and has it's like a sketch comedy show, a variety show, a sketch comedy show. And his whole shtick is he's always doing naughty things with girls and nurses, and they all run around really quickly and with a sped up camera with the right. But dude, that was the closest thing to a Playboy magazine that you could possibly get to if you were our age, right? If you did not have access to that kind of adult material, man, that was pretty impressive to see girls running around with, oh my gosh, in their bras and underwear. Whoa, hey. But back then, I guess that was a big deal, right? I mean, seemed like it at the time.
Again, that was a variety show. And the variety shows that we had were Sonny and Cher and Donnie and Marie and Tony Orlando and Don and the Captain and Tennille. Oh, there was more than that, probably, right? There was, they put on the summer, whether it was Shields and Yarnell, which I think they were Mimes, right? Mimes had a variety show.
Oh my God. You are exactly right. Mimes.
Who wants to watch mimes anywhere, let alone on TV? Mimes don't talk.
Mimes don't talk. I think you've just come up with the next Lifetime original movie, or maybe the Hallmark Channel.
Mimes.
That's how desperate we were for entertainment. We watched fucking mimes on TV. And by the way, not mimes in a skit, an entire variety show centered around a pair of mimes. That's how desperate we were for entertainment. And by the way, let's talk about the darker side of the 70s, which is divorce and bad marriages, right? Every single variety show you just mentioned ended in tragedy, right? Let's talk about Sonny and Cher, divorce, bad marriage. What was the other one that you mentioned? Captain and Tennille, horrible marriage. By every account, they just were miserable together the entire time. Lots of smiles, lots of sadness, though, behind the scenes.
Well, the things I didn't talk about, though, it's like the Bradys. Where were the dads? Where was the other dad and the other mom? They never had any grandparents drop by. They didn't have any cousins. It's like, you know what I mean? It's looking back. It's like these were very kind of isolated. Were they both widows and widowers, and they were also only children, and their parents were. You know what I mean? Those normal family interactions that we had, theirs were really mysterious.
Okay.
What happened at Eddie's father? What happened to Eddie's mother? Right? It's like the courtship of Eddie's father, and we didn't hear much about Eddie's mother. Right. So you're right. A lot of unanswered questions. High concept. You hit it on it already, that it was very high concept. Like, all right, I got an idea. There's this dad and he's not married and he's raising his kid. And it's like, okay, because maybe it's very relatable.
I have to jump in on that. I'm going to call Courtship of Eddie's Father low concept. That was basically just a dad. The mom is gone. I think she died. And now we're going to do a whole bunch of unintentional racial stereotypes about his Asian housekeeper, which I know was unintentional. But when someone is saying, thank you, Mr. Eddie's father, it's just, again, we're going back to Long Duck Dong here. It was a different time. I get it.
Family affair.
There you go. Family affair. The wife was dead and somehow.
No, he was an uncle. The parents were dead. What the hell happened to the parents?
Where are the parents? I think you just stumbled onto another Lifetime original movie. But, I think There were more shows like that, though, right? There were more shows with that super questionable, what the hell happened kind of a backstory.
Nanny and the Professor.
You're right.
Which was one that was not the same thing. It's like there was, and again, getting back to the supernatural, getting back to Bewitched, he had a witch. It was another witch, not the same witch. That would have made sense. Maybe to have the same witch. She could have got a new show. She could have like moved on from Darren, but like she was a witch and he had 3 kids and no mom in sight. Kind of like Disney movies, I guess. There's a lot of missing parents.
Wait. You're talking about the Nanny the Professor?
The nanny was a witch.
No,
right?
Chris. No, sir. She was not a witch. Chris, this is then you may as well call Mary Poppins a witch. Are you calling Mary Poppins a witch? Because I dare you to call Mary Poppins a witch. Go ahead, Chris. Try.
Mary Poppins was a witch. What was she?
Chris, that is really close-minded about people with special gifts in the case of paranormal gifts, right? She was not a witch. She was the same creature as Julie Andrews in the movie Mary Poppins. She was a nanny that was sort of a supernatural being, but not a witch. Come on, man. Dude, Jeanie wasn't a witch. She was a genie. I don't know what you'd call her, but she had powers. Teleportation. She could fly, dematerialize, rematerialize, conjuring. She definitely could read minds. Fuck, that's a witch. But you're right, though. These other shows that popped up as, the most popular shows of the time, One Day at a Time. We mentioned that before. Another presumably broken family, or at least there's no father. Didn't really care to get into that one because, again, I'm not a big fan of Bonnie Franklin. She goes in the same list, as I've said many times before, as Sammy Hagar, Ryan Seacrest, David Copperfield, and Howie Long, just to name a few of the random people who I do not like, who have never done anything to deserve my wrath. But no, for sure, Chris. I mean, there is a weird pattern here with these shows. And then what about My Three Sons? Another one where the mom is gone and it's just the 3 kids and the dad and the uncle Charlie that's trying to help them make their way. What was it about broken families back then? It's so weird. It's an odd theme. But it was rampant back then.
You're right what you know.
I guess.
Or you're trying to appeal the sense. It's just like, maybe if they think, you know what, a lot of kids wish that their dad wasn't around. Maybe a lot of kids wish their parents weren't married. Maybe a lot of kids wish their parents were just mysteriously gone. They lived in Manhattan in a penthouse with their uncle and a butler. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, I'm gonna live that fantasy, and people are going to relate to it. And
now, Chris, you got it. You got me thinking here. I have to go backwards for 1 second to the Brady Bunch. It is beyond weird that other than the one guy that was an extended family member who came in at the end of the last season of the Brady Bunch as they were jumping the shark, and you know the guy that I'm talking about, right? The kid. What was he?
Cousin Oliver
with the standard bowl haircut. Every kid back then, from Adam Rich. Oh, wasn't 8 is Enough? Wasn't that? Oh, 8 is Enough was a happily married couple, right? They did have the husband and wife on 8 is Enough.
No, the mom, the woman who played the mom in real life died. So then they had to add, so again, she died in real life.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then they
that's
had
different.
to sort of cast, they had to get a mom character in there, but really quickly, like, hey, dad's really been in mourning. He's been alone for 6 months. So, we need a new mom by the start of the next season. Right. So, Dick Van Patten got around a little bit there, but that's okay, I guess, because they wanted, because 8 kids with a dad would have been, because I think it changed the focus of the story.
None of the kids noticed that the dad, suddenly everyone woke up one morning and the old mom was gone and a slightly hotter version suddenly appeared, and everybody was okay with that.
They didn't care. Yeah. Nobody thought like, Dad, how could you?
Very slick. Yeah. That's a good Dick Van Patten move there. But going back to the Brady Bunch again, I can't let this go because I think you're right. Other than Cousin Oliver, you're telling me that Mike and Carol Brady, they didn't have any brothers or sisters or moms or dads or cousins other than Oliver that ever came into contact with them? Here's my theory. It's witness protection.
I think it's really a show about two families, both running from the mob, that were thrown together in California in the midst of, all the chaos of California to hide from, the bad guys because they were in witness protection. That's the only thing I can think of, right? And Alice was actually kind of like the federal agent that was just there to kind of monitor and check in, the handler, right? She had her own little area in the back there. Sam the Butcher, weirdly, CIA. Sometimes he would come in. The whole thing about the meat and the butcher shop, it was just a front. So it's all starting to come together for me. I'm sticking with that theory.
Cousin Oliver? There were never any references to Mike or Carol having siblings.
Whose cousin is he? I don't even. Who is this kid?
And where are his parents? Did they die with the family affair parents? Because again, nobody knows. Were they involved in some sort of activity? But here you go. So you reboot it, right? You reboot it now, like with your concept, let's take it a step. With the Brady Bunch, actually, it's witness protection, and they're thrown together because, let's say, Carol's husband and Mike's wife were some kind of criminals, and they caused all kind of havoc. And yes, they had to so the kids had to uproot their life. Mike and Carol have to pretend to be married, and then they learn to love each other. Maybe they have more than one bathroom, the 6 kids, because 6 kids thrown together, there's no conflict there. That's it. That's a 21st century 2024 concept. I think as soon as we finish here, we should start on the pilot episode.
By the way,
I think you got something.
I'm with you 100%, and I'm sure I have to believe that this was joked about in the past. I can't believe that some comedian hasn't brought this up. As God is my witness, I do believe I'm thinking about this on my own. I don't think I heard it anywhere, but Mike Brady, what does he do for a living, Chris? What is his job? Brady.
He was an architect.
He was an architect. And did he or did he not draw the plans for that house?
He did. He designed that house.
That house was designed by Mike Brady. 6 kids, 1 fucking bathroom. That's an architect? Really? I'm sorry. I just think it's a weird loophole. It's almost like the weird torpedo bay on the Death Star, where suddenly if you hit this little port in the back of it, the whole fucking it just doesn't make any sense that it would be designed that way. Why would it be designed that way? I take that back. When it comes to Star Wars, they actually do explain that in the Disney series Andor, where you later learn that the architect of the Death Star purposely put in a flaw, a very secretive hidden flaw, just in case one day he could pass along that secret to someone who might blow it up. Think about that. Shit, I may have just ruined Andor for a bunch of people. Hopefully you've already seen that. But anyway, back to architects and bathrooms.
I'm guessing Alice had her own bathroom in her little maid's quarters right next to the kitchen, but so there was 2 baths. I'm assuming. Otherwise, Alice had to go upstairs and hope that one of the kids wasn't in the bathroom. I think, and again, I never saw these films, so I'm sure maybe somebody's going to. There was Brady Bunch films, comedies in the 15, 20 years ago. I think one of the they did address. I think Carol's long lost husband showed up. And I think he actually wasn't her long, but I think that was a plot device. So I think people have tried to address, at least, but not in that show. I think somewhere out in pop culture, Carol's first husband, the kid's actual husband, was a character, but that was all played for comedic effect, and he may not have turned out to be anybody. I'm sure somebody will let us know. They can send us an email to, and this is good enough time as ever, if you have a comment or a question, or if you want to clarify something that we said, send us an email to nicepullpod@gmail.com. That's nicepullpod@gmail.com. I thought about getting an AOL address or maybe a CompuServe, but those really weren't available.
Oh, yeah. That'd have been good, man. I love that.
Thinking about the things that we do now. But again, if somebody wants to let us know, send us an email. But that's a concept. The higher concept, the better than what again, all these families. And I guess that's the thing too. It's like, the same thing with doctor shows and cop shows. There are a lot of shows about families, and they eventually evolved and got better, whether it was Family Ties, right, or something of that nature. I think of some other good shows about families. I don't know, they're all kind of escaping me at the moment. The Sopranos, although I don't necessarily think that was a family show. But when you think about it, it's like I'm in a family. Why do I want to watch a show about a family?
Well, we want to watch what we already kind of know. It's just kind of human nature, right? But now that I'm thinking of it, maybe we already touched on this. Going back again, every single TV show that you mentioned, where you're missing a spouse or they're from a marriage that's no longer around, in every single case, unless I'm mistaken, it was always that allegedly that the other spouse had died, right? I know Nanny the Professor, his wife had died. I know that Bill Bixby's wife, right? Obviously, the imaginary wife there in Courtship of Eddie's father, she had died. I think in the original episode, it was at least implied with the Brady Bunch that their spouses had died. So interesting that it was all these deaths. And that would then play into our TV show, which is this weird, not a TV show, but a movie, which is the weird reimagining of the Brady Bunch, right? Where it's Mike and Carol that actually murdered their spouses, right? That's what we're talking about. Murdered spouses. They didn't die of natural causes, Chris. That's what I'm pitching. I think that Mike and Carol are actual killers, right?
That's dark. That's dark. I think their spouses were into some nasty crap. They were criminals, drug dealers, gun traffickers, whatever. I don't know. Yours could work, but that's super dark. If it turns into they murdered each other's spouses and ran away together, and then Alice is actually, to flip Alice, he's not their handler. Alice is like deep cover trying to collect enough evidence to convict them. How about that? Alice is an FBI agent, not a handler. She's investigating them.
There you go. And so they're not in witness protection. As it turns out, they, like happened in the 70s so much with the swingers, right? That was a big thing in the 70s, was swinger parties and swapping husbands and wives with each other. So
the
key parties where you put your keys in a bowl and pull the key out of the bowl, and that's who you get for the night. I think here's what happened. I think Mike and Carol Brady lived in the same cul-de-sac or within the same area, and they were at a swingers party and they fell in love. And then, they had kids of their own and they decided to off their own spouses and then create new identities, move out to California and assume a brand new life as the Bradys, right? And why the kids didn't know all this, we'll have to figure that out. But you're right. Alice is absolutely a plant. She's going to figure it out, right?
This is a streaming series, right? Because again, this is dark. This is not network TV. But I see it. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Let's just put it that way. I like it.
All right. Well, another fun-filled episode. Man, that was a lot of nice polls. Really made me think, triggered all those little weird stored memories in the back of my brain that hadn't been activated. And man, some of those for 25, 30, even 40 years. So mission accomplished. What do you think, Chris? Are we out of here?
We're out of here. We haven't jumped the shark yet.
All right. Till next time.
Till next time.